All right. We call our meeting to order. It is 12 o'clock, September 26th. My late father's 70th birthday. Economic Growth and Development Committee. I'll ask for somebody to make a motion to approve last August 21st committee meeting minutes. Please, Mr. Stroh on the first, chair the meeting for us. And Mr. Mayday on the second. Any discussion about the minutes? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. I'm going to move into workforce development agenda. We have two resolution requests. I'm sorry, first public comment or privilege of the floor from anybody that would like to speak to the committee. Seeing none, we'll go into Liza's agenda. The first resolution request is to amend the budget to include the WIOA funding, federal funding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. You have our budget in front of you, and I'm happy to share any changes, updates from last year to this year as we just received our federal funding. Let me proceed.
Yes, please.
So we did take a 12% hit from the feds, a cut, which is about $94,000. We thankfully do not feel like that is going to be as much of an issue. We have cut items like office equipment and things that we don't need for this coming year that we've already taken care of in the last 2 years. So we're not worried about that budget cut impacting our local residents and the services that they receive. With the budget, I've also included for you the $100,000 investment that Warren County has made into workforce development. And I've shown you how we've spent that money to date and then how we would spend it on the back for 2025 if the board votes to add an additional 100,000 to our budget. We have been able to use that funding to really help municipal workers primarily with training costs. For example, we're sponsoring 3 more Johnsburg Highway folks and getting their CDL licenses. Many of you have referred people, so thank you, to get training and CDL upgrades, CPR certifications, other things that are required for their jobs. It really helps us retain our local workers. So that is one of the areas where you'll see we've increased training dollars for 2025 for up to 70,000 out of the 100,000 of the Warren County money. And just as a friendly reminder, our federal money, WIOA, is a different program year. So that's why you see our budget says PY24. We're on an academic year. I'm happy to answer any questions about our budget.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Liza, I'm sorry for not giving you a heads up, but WIOA is always a question mark in terms of what the funding is going to be. So I'm curious, what was the basis for the 12% reduction and what are we looking for the next few years?
Yeah, so WIOA is up for reauthorization right now. And there are proposals in the new federal funding that will look a little bit different for how we can use that money, but I don't think we'll really know how it's going to be impacted until after the election. But we know that people on both sides of the aisle definitely support workforce development. But I'm not sure why we got the 12% cut. There wasn't any reason that was given with it. Everybody faced a cut. It wasn't just our region. But I think with low unemployment numbers consistently still, I would assume that maybe that could be a motive for it. But we know we have to keep upskilling people and training people and pulling people from the sidelines to keep our workforce strong.
I guess my concern is, what might happen and what might we do to our staffing if there's another 12% cut next year or a 20% cut.
Yeah, especially since I've been using ARPA money. And after December, we can't use ARPA money for salaries anymore. We do still use ARPA money for other programs and services. I don't think we'll know how to adjust until we see what those actual numbers are and what the new WIOA, because the name will probably change too. About every 7 to 10 years, the name changes. what it will entail and require of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions for Liza? Somebody want to make a motion to bring this resolution to the floor? By Mr. Bean on the first and Mr. Wild on the second. Other discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor of amending the budget to include the WIOA federal funding, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. We'll go into our second resolution, which is to create a fiscal coordinator position, something we've got a couple years.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, so the second request is to create the new position, fiscal coordinator. You may recall this conversation from the summer. My current account manager, that job description does need updated. HR agrees that it should be, the title should be fiscal coordinator to match other comparable departments in the county. My account manager is going to retire in January. So the plan is that we are able to add this position now, hire this fall so that they can train one another, and then delete the account manager position in January after the retirement.
And the base salary is quite a bit lower than what the retiree is retiring at. Is that right?
Yes,
So that's
just because the account manager's been here 16 years
Yep.
with the county.
And it's been approved by the HR director and the county administrator.
Yes, you have the document in your packet.
Somebody want to bring this to the floor? Mr. Bean on the first and Mr. Stroud on the second. Other discussion? This is no financial impact to the county. It comes from your federal funding.
Correct.
You're overseeing federal, state, and county budgets at different reporting times throughout the year.
Correct. However, we have used some of the Warren County workforce money for fringe, retiree insurance, things like that.
All right, I'll call the question. All in favor of creating a position of fiscal coordinator, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. General workforce update.
Yes. So our August unemployment is 3.5, so still staying steady below 4% unemployment for Warren County. That also applies to Glens Falls metro area. It will go up a little bit in the winter. It always does, but we are not seeing that yet. But we do have 2 job fairs planned for October, one for people with disabilities and one general public and businesses. I'm happy to have Don Lehman help promote more of those if any of you want to share that with your businesses or job seekers in your respective communities. On September 9th, we had our hospitality workforce celebration. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being there and others for your support as well. We had around 350 hospitality, retail, and tourism workers of Warren County enjoy a free night at Six Flags. And we gave out 7 different award categories, as well as thousands of dollars worth of prizes, raffle prizes, et cetera, from local businesses. So, and we raised $1,000 for Family Services Association in just 3 hours. So we're very proud of that event keeps growing, and we're very grateful to Six Flags, as well as Tourism Department, for helping out and making sure that event is an ongoing success. Now that schools are back in session, we are super excited about everything our school districts are doing around career and technical education. I'm blown away. I'm excited. There is a culinary program being added to the Glens Falls School District. There is a lot of career and technical education happening at Queensbury School District. Just had a meeting with them yesterday about adding a girls representing in trades middle school club, GRIT. We're excited about that. And it's not to replace BOCES programs. It is to have additional opportunities for their students, because BOCES, you have to enroll at 11th grade into some of those programs. So some of these that the school districts are doing are starting younger, and they don't have to necessarily pay for those, right? Like they do for some of the BOCES programs. So we're very excited about our continued work with the school districts, and we're supporting what each of them want to do with respect to career and technical education for their students, as well as their students who aren't sure what they want to do. We do a lot of career exposure and training opportunities for students to try out different things. Our student to careers development specialist position that was open is now filled. That new person starts on Monday. I'm very proud to share that the new person was a corrections officer at Great Meadow and has a lot of other helpful experience too that will really help our team and our students. So I'm excited about that. We still have money with our childcare grant to help anybody in Warren County who wants to open their own home-based childcare business. It covers training costs and startup materials. As you may recall, we received that grant a couple years ago for both Warren and Saratoga counties. Saratoga County has been a little more successful with this because they have a bigger population to recruit from. So continue to help spread the word that we do have funding available through May 2026 to help anybody that wants to open their own home-based childcare provider business. No cost to them, and all of the required training with OCFS. Those are my primary updates, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
When were those state CTE cuts gonna take place or come into effect?
That's a good question. There's been debate around that because are you referring to the school district ones?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, because there was there is a law in place that the schools can't have less funding than they did the year before. So I think they have rescinded some of that and they're reconfiguring that. So I haven't heard any updates about the budget, but if I do, I'm happy to share that.
Other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move into our planning and community development agenda. We have 5 resolution requests. Our first one is there's a lot of housekeeping at the beginning here. Request to transfer funds from contingency account to transfer account for capital projects, increase for those accounts and close 2 of the capital fund accounts. And this is some fall cleaning that's residual from several years now.
Yeah, there's a decade of grant funded projects. We open up capital accounts for every grant funded project. We receive funding from a variety of sources, Department of State, DEC, Homes and Community Renewal. And as we do the project, we get payments back for salaries, reimbursements, and what happens at the end of it is there might be a couple $1,000s here or there left over. So across these 7 projects, I think it's about over $2 million of work that we've done. We're asking for $17,000 in contingency to sort of clean up loose ends, and we do want to close out all these accounts. This is for just best practice bookkeeping on our end. We want to get all these old accounts closed out so we can start with projects that we own and that are recent. So the overall impact on the county is $20,000 from contingency, 2,500 of which will be returned back to the general fund.
Somebody want to make a motion to bring this to the floor? First by Mr. Bean. And the second by Mr. Mayday. Further discussion. I know it's a little clunky when you were first telling me about it, or hard to understand every little part of it. 1A through D, yes. Yep. Call the question. All in favor of transferring funds from contingency account to transfer account for capital projects, everything for 1A through D, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries. Request number 2, transfer funds from salaries to contracts.
On a similar vein of housekeeping, we have a contract for doing some implementation of First Wilderness Heritage Area projects, total of about $25,000. We had originally set this contract and associated with an old capital account from old First Wilderness Heritage Corridor project. We want to close out the old capital account and have a new standalone account just for the project that's in front of us. So we're not having these legacy projects associated with new contracts. We're requesting that some of the unallocated surplus from 2024 due to unfilled positions be obligated to this new capital account so we can complete this contract.
For a total of 25,000.
Yeah.
Would somebody like to make a motion to bring this to the floor? First by Supervisor Stroh and a second by Supervisor Wild. Discussion on this request. Call the question. All in favor of transferring funds from salaries to contracts for $25,000, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries, and we'll go into number 3. Apply, I'm very excited, apply for grant funding through the NBRC Catalyst Program to support improvements at the Warren County Fish Hatchery. You'll find, I'll point you to the master plan that was developed.
So,
Deeper in your packet that was developed exclusively with ARPA money.
yeah, staff time and ARPA funds. We had a $15,000 allocation from ARPA. We leveraged that to hire landscape architects and work with the Director of Parks and Recreation and Jeff Ingley, Fish Hatchery. Developed a master plan of improvements, figured out how to prioritize, make it all work. And this, we recently submitted a letter to apply to the Northern Borders Regional Commission to their Catalyst program. Because Warren County is qualified as distressed in some ways, it gives us a favorable matching requirement of just 20% local share and allows us to leverage 80% of federal funds. We just received notification 2 days ago that our letter to apply was successful. So this is really, I can't stress enough how important the fish hatchery is to our regional economy. It generates over $100 million in economic impact. It supports 151 or 251 jobs across the county. If you consider the impact of our fisheries, DEC studies all of this. 2017 angler impact, and not only the economic impact, but also the community impact in terms of school groups coming through there. Allows visitors to actually access the Hudson River. You know, there's bathrooms there. It's this very much sought after, easily accessible public in our wild areas. I think that's something with our changing demographics and visitor base that we really need to support. In that master plan, you'll see it, I think we have about $1.5 million of improvements outlined. We're asking for $210,000 from the county in matching funds at some point, if this grant application is successful.
So you're hoping that would bring in 840, is that right?
We're actually asking for $942,000 from the federal government. DPW will be providing about $25,000 in-kind match for some of the facility improvements.
What does the committee think about that? 200,000 to get 1.1 million. Where would the money come from?
That's the question. Where's the money coming from? Do we know?
I have a few ideas. I don't know if they're ready to entertain all of them. I mean, one of the very, from my personal opinion and observation, is a legitimate use of occupancy tax funds because it does support the fisheries. We have a ranking of number 4 across all of New York State counties for fishery activity and economic output by our fisheries, which is pretty considerable. And if you consider the fact that there's so many people coming to visit this area to go fishing, to explore the outdoors, you know, they've come to expect that they are able to get fish. And we're experiencing climate change. We're experiencing staffing issues where it's hard to even get a full staff of people to maintain these facilities. Really, the upgrades that we're asking for will allow Dean and his crew to produce these fish for our tourism economy more efficiently and effectively.
Is this, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind? Are the projects required to be done in all 1 year, or could this be separated out to a multi-year project?
It's
So
like,
that it's less of an impact on whatever funding source we have.
well, there's 2 phases outlined in the master plan, and it's likely that we would draw down these funds over the course of a couple of years.
100,000.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable expectation with a reimbursement-based grant. It's the idea would be that we go out for, you know, we put out an RFP to get all this work done. We work closely with DPW on this one, and then we reimburse the contractor as they do the work. So yeah, I think it's realistic to expect that you draw down $100K a year.
So the total improvements here, 1.5 million, so 20% would be 300,000. What are we gonna do? We only need 200?
Phase one, I think you're looking
Yeah.
for, we're talking.
We're looking for phase one, and part of the match is being provided by in-kind services from our DPW of $25,000. So that's where the only $210,000 in local share cash contribution comes in.
It's a great project.
Yeah.
We still have to figure out where the money's coming from. So I think until we have an idea of how we're going to fund this, should probably,
What's your time?
When is the deadline? Yeah.
Yeah, what's the time?
So we can submit a grant application in October. Those announcements won't be made until end of the year. And that will give us some time to have contracts lined up, grant agreements in place, and we can get funding in 2025 for this project.
And then can we decide how we're gonna, I'm not sure just exactly what we would need to do at that point. You need them to know where the money's coming from ahead of the submitting of the grant?
Not specifically.
okay.
I mean,
Just
generally, I mean, the purpose of introducing this to this group too is to get a general recognition of the importance of this project, and that going forward, if it was successful, that there'd be a willingness to fund that match. It's not necessarily committing. I mean, worst case scenario, we submit the application, it's accepted, we're awarded it, and the county's in a financial situation where we say, listen, things are tight, we can't provide the match for this. We can decline to sign the grant agreement and turn back the award.
County
I still
administrator.
think that when you're looking at that kind of money, we should be able to find. It's huge as far as tourism in Warren County. Fishing's a big thing.
I'd just like, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to remind you, I think I defer to the county attorney on whether this would be an appropriate use of occupancy tax, and it'd have to go to the OC tax committee for a vote. If that's in fact the case, if you're going to approve it moving forward today, I recommend that the committee be prepared to recognize that in all likelihood, that $210,620 would come out of the general fund, unrestricted, unappropriated surplus. You know, if we could find some other way to do it, possibly, but you have to be prepared to say that 200,000 is coming out of the general fund.
Or
Chair,
deny the
yeah,
grant.
I don't even.
Procedurally, the committee could just grant or move this proposal for a resolution forward authorizing submission today, which is what we discussed 2 days ago about how we're trying to restrict that multi-step process, but this would be, it sounds like it's possibly a simple, having the department come back for further approval and authorization may be appropriate here. So it is possible to just grant permission to submit. So they meet the deadline of October 18, 2024 for submission, but that the resolution would not include those other authorizations which we're now doing as a regular course of business. So it would require further action by the committee, possibly other committees. I'm not in a position today to give a legal opinion on using occupancy tax revenue. So everybody has a little time, but the important piece is the application gets submitted in a timely manner.
How does the committee feel about moving forward with applying?
I would support that, but I think at the same time, we need to be actively looking at how we're going to
Where
fund
the
this.
money's gonna come.
Will somebody make a motion to bring this resolution request to the floor? First by Mr. Bean, second by Mr. Mayday. Any other discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor of applying for grant funding through the NBR's Catalyst Program, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Will go on to resolution request number 4, which is applying for funding through the DC's Municipal Waste Reduction and Recycling Program.
Our junior planner, Matthew Smith, has been tasked with restarting the climate task force. In his duties, he's working closely with Scott Royal, solid waste coordinator. I know the solid waste committee and our Public Facilities Group, I believe it, our committee has been working towards exploring recycling facilities and then also organics management solutions. We put in an application for a pilot program. We're asking for permission to submit a grant application, fairly modest, $40,000 in total. I think $20,000 would be in-kind match. So no impact on the county's finances, to do education outreach on composting. And this would be in support of what we hope will be a successful grant application for organics management facility pilot, which we put in through Climate Smart Grants already. So it's simply asking for permission. This is being developed with Scott Royal and Matthew Smith.
So 50% local match, but that would be in kind by
Yeah,
DPW.
yeah.
Somebody like to bring this to the floor? First by Mr. Stroh. And second by Mr. Dean. Further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor of applying for this program, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries and brings us into our last request to apply for grant funding through the AGFTC's Make the Connection program.
There's, we do not have specific projects identified for this ask. The application's due at the end of October, but we're hoping to work with our DPW and so our municipal partners on identifying pedestrian and bicycle safety projects across the county. There's a really favorable match rate, 20% local share, 80% federal. So I'm really just looking for authorization to apply, and then I'll work out with individual departments and municipalities on the match if we do submit something. A few of the potential projects we've already identified, Cary Road improvements, that intersection off of exit, I think it's 18. There's been a lot of more traffic volumes going through there. There's been some identified safety improvements that we did through an AGFTC plan. There's a Route 9 corridor. We have a safety plan for that from 2019. And then we also have, I think there's some also intermunicipal initiatives between Queensbury and Glens Falls surrounding their high school area. So there's a few different opportunities, but we're still working out the details with local sponsors on that.
Did this include, we were talking about the Lake George terminus of the bike path?
No, that's totally separate at this point. That's actually becoming swept up with some of the Lake George DRI efforts as well.
Somebody like to make a motion to bring this to the floor?
Some matching grants of $100.
First by Mr.
It would be 20% match, and this is it's a good opportunity for municipalities, and I'm happy to help work on an application with you.
Just
Yeah,
again, just curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a first and a second. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I
Mr.
have
Royal.
a comment.
It's handed down.
Ethan, as you go forward with these, and I think it's a really great thing that your team is doing in terms of bringing funds in to the county. My concern is that you only have a certain amount of money that we can work with this
Yeah.
year, and I don't even know what it is.
Right.
So how do we prioritize between one versus another?
Yeah.
So I need your help in terms of understanding that, whether it's, I don't know if it's a return on investment.
Yeah.
That would be simple and easy, but I'm not sure if we're gonna get any return on this investment, so I'm just looking for some help to help understand how we can move something forward at least.
That is a great question. I almost think you're paid to be here by the American Planning Association.
Here by the.
Yeah, so right now we're in the process, as you know, it's we're developing the outdoor recreation economy strategic plan. That's one of those plans that's pointing heavily towards making investments in existing infrastructure that we already have, like the fish hatchery. Our comprehensive plan is another one of those things where we listen to community priorities and things like quality of life, age-friendly communities, alternative transportation as being as a community priority. And they say, okay, what other plans do we already have, safety and technical plans from AGFTC that align with these county priorities that we've started to identify? And we use these ongoing planning initiatives and recently completed plans, combine it with some of these technical studies and these grant funding opportunities. And we use those as filters to say, we have some idea of what the priorities are from the community. These are the ones we want to talk about now. So we're using those planning documents as the basis of what we chase after for funding. That's helping us. There's about, for every grant opportunity that I bring in front of this committee, there's another dozen that we don't bring to your attention.
Okay.
Because we're not pursuing
No,
them.
I understand. So, going back to the budget, and this isn't really what I'm supposed to be talking about, but it's top of my mind
Yeah,
in terms of this time of year. Have you, budgeted anything, in your budget for matches? Is there a line item somewhere that we can have in the budget that says this might be something we could use for, matches and for our grants?
you know, we have a modest line item to support the First Wilderness Heritage Corridor, but I think that the conversation around readiness for grant funding is a bigger policy decision. And I think that's something that we get into with the comprehensive plan. And I think that as opposed to me proposing it as part of my budget, I'd be more comfortable, you know, having, whether it's the committee to discuss it as a concept or the full board. And then going forward, when it comes to budgeting time, be like, yes, we would like to have some funding set aside to match grant funding opportunities. And I think that would be a really strategic move on the part of the county, but I'm not gonna try to force that big picture policy conversation just in the context of the budget. We do talk about it in the comprehensive plan, though.
So if you had your way, what would we need in 2025 for these pressing, opportunities that we have?
How much money could we use to meet community goals?
Yeah.
I mean, you could put millions of dollars in, but I would never ask for that much. Yeah,
Depends on the opportunity. right?
yeah, I mean, seriously, though, there are, you know, you could say there's massive transportation projects, you could say there's, you know, wastewater treatment facility upgrades, there are an enormous number of different needs that our communities have. But in terms of establishing a standing fund to match grants, I think a modest request would be a few $100,000 to put the county in a better position to just confidently move forward with applying for certain grants.
If we ever looked at trends, as far as when we look at stuff like this, like, you know, over the period of the last 5 years, when you apply for grant funding, how often, what your trends are as far as matching monies that you need? Have you ever looked at it that way?
Yeah, and it's actually becoming a little bit more favorable for us right now, between the state and federal government. And like I was mentioning with this Northern Borders Regional Commission, we're at a 20% match share versus like 40 or 50 in other places. It's pretty favorable right now, and there's a lot of money coming out between the Restore Mother Nature Bond Act and other federal spending. There's a lot of grants out there, and yeah, the matches are pretty favorable, and from a planner's perspective, it's kind of raining money right now. And you kind of want to have your hands out when it's raining
Right,
money.
but I guess what I'm saying is like, if you took a look from 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, you know, in 20, were you looking for $300,000 in matching funds? In 21, you were looking for 250. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So every
yeah, we
year
could, actually, that's a good question. We could track that over the last few years. We could easily.
And this
do
way,
that. Yeah.
we might know on an annual basis, at least a general idea what we'd be looking for in matching funds, depending on what you're gonna apply for grants.
Yeah, we could certainly look into that. It's a good question.
Mr. Chairman, just one more, thought, you know, Ethan just mentioned it, there's like wastewater.
Yep.
Grants and the like. Is there a way that the next time the committee meets, we can get a summary of some of these other, grant opportunities? And just to see where else we might want to try to go and capture some money that's raining from the feds and the state. And if it makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's make some moves.
Yeah.
If there's an opportunity.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's something we can do next month,
Yeah.
but I think there's a timing issue that we need to kind of address and try to figure that out.
About, you know, we're just saying about in-kind service. That applies too, right? You know,
As far as matching, yeah, I would imagine so, yeah. Mhm.
So is our time count?
I think. so.
Yeah, that is a strategy that we've
Only
used in the
$20,000
past,
a year.
in-kind services, that it can be really productive. There are some limitations to it. We don't want to it's super, super useful. In some situations, it can slow down a project if we struggle, especially with like staffing issues, like getting enough DPW, and then like something like culvert blows out, or, you know, a roof caves in somewhere. they can pull the staff that was gonna be dedicated to this like grant funded projects in kind, pulls them away from the project, then it like limits our ability to capture the reimbursement from the state. Not to say we shouldn't do in kind, but this, there, you know, there are some considerations involved with it.
All right, we have a first from Mr. Wild, a second from Mr. Stroh, and we have a question from the clerk.
On this one, are you approving just the submission of the grant application, or are you doing the application?
Grant application. Yeah.
Similar to what we did with the last one, holding
Yes.
off.
We're holding off.
Any other discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor of applying for this grant funding through the Make the Connection program, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. We go into discussion items. 2025 budget.
I guess I'll start on this one. So Sarah Frankfeld and I, we prepared our budget in tandem with one another. There's 3 budget codes in there, one of which is the 80-20, which is a count. No changes in that one. It's a count we have set up for larger capital projects like comprehensive plan. 80-21, that is the planning and community development budget. 80-22 is a GIS budget. Then 80-23 is our first wilderness heritage corridor account. And that really is, it's a very small, I think it's very
Sure, 29.
It says, yeah.
29, excuse me. I was going in sequential order, but I missed a few in there. So we prepared this budget under the directive request to reduce our budget by 5%. We made a very concerted effort. I'll let Sarah speak to her own budget, but she was very successful in it. For the planning budget, we were in a position where costs that are beyond our control, retirement and employee benefits, resulted in a fairly sharp increase in our budget. But due to some reorganization, I guess I would say we got a little bit leaner with our staff, despite the fact that we are at higher staffing levels than we've ever been. We would have had a 3.6 reduction in our budget, but for some of these legacy retirement costs that are absorbed into our department's budget that really have no impact on how our department performs or functions, but that is what accounts for these increases. If not for that, we would have had about a 3.6% reduction in our budget this year. Other notes on the budget, we've seen an increase in subscription costs. We still, we've made a slight reduction in professional training and educational budget. And it was really the employee benefits and retirement costs was the biggest change in our budget this year. We've actually saved on personnel costs. I'm really proud of the group that we have working right now. They're professionals, they're ambitious, and they're really good at what they do. And we're doing it for less money than we did it last year. But it's a fairly straightforward budget. We don't have large equipment or large contracts. You do have specific questions that aren't addressed in the memo, please let me know.
Any questions about the budget?
There was a comment, Mr. Chairman, about deleting a position and creating a new position. We had some more details on that.
Yes, I provided a justification letter at the back of the budget package. But to articulate it here is our department has been moving an incredible amount of state and federal funding over the past few years, including ARPA funds, septic replacement funds, and what we hope to be an increased amount of funding through the CDBG program and homes and community renewal for home rehabilitation, like critical housing programs. It requires an immense amount of coordination and eye for detail to go between our county procurement, auditing, and financial mechanisms, as well as the state and federal mechanisms. And on top of that, the applicants and recipients of these funds. So for example, this position is currently tasked with administering, about $13 million in ARPA funds. And this requires an immense amount of eye for detail and coordination and adherence to both US Treasury laws, our own local laws, and outreach with these applicants. And you could say the same with the septic replacement program.
And what you're proposing, I think, is more in line with what civil service would want you to.
Correct. We had a extensive conversation with our HR director, and we reviewed this change, and she has endorsed this change. We had extensive conversation about the duties and expectations, and in there's also a sign sheet indicating her support for this change.
What's the salary differential?
Net, I think there's a $3,000 difference because we had actually been using overtime to cover the work that this office specialist had been doing. So you'll notice in our budget this year, we took out the overtime. And instead, we're putting this into one legitimate position that recognizes that role in one place.
Just I'm a little hesitant because a big part of this is ARPA. And goes on until 25, 26,
Mhm.
and then ARPA's done, right? So.
Yeah, no, yeah.
So you've got a 2-year increase of effort and responsibilities that we have to deal with, and that goes away.
Yep.
So is this a temporary position, a full-time position?
This is, so, I'm very sensitive to that consideration with ARPA. Because, we are drawing down those funds and the reporting requirements will be tapering off. But earlier this year, we submitted 2 different applications, one for homes and community renewal. It's an emergency home rehabilitation program for seniors for $200,000. We submitted another application through community development block grant funds for septic replacements, another $400,000. We anticipate, I was just actually at the Rural Housing Coalition Conference at Fort William Henry for the past Monday, Tuesday. And we certainly want to take advantage of more of these federal funds for housing. And that requires an intense amount of administration. And eye for detail.
Yeah, we're subcontracting that administration out for the 2 and for the restore, right?
For that first round of restore. But based on this conference that we're at with the Rural Housing Coalition, there's a lot of community development block grant funds that can support housing in Warren County. And we need to have the staff in place to run those programs.
Thank you.
Mr. Stroh.
Yeah, so would Sarah Castler be the new fiscal coordinator, or do we have to go to the civil service list and pick the top 3 if there's been a test given and so forth?
This is a reassign. We have a current staff member currently that this will be reassigned to this position.
Oh, okay, because I see Sarah as the office specialist. And so she would retain her position and we would be hiring new?
There's existing positions in our, and I don't want to talk about specifics of names, correct? Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. No, it's a
so we have an existing person that would
correct.
meet the
Yes, we
qualifications
do not need to hire
needed.
new. No.
Okay,
Yeah,
So, but we are deleting a position, an
correct.
active position.
okay.
Other questions about the budget? Do you have any general updates from GIS or planning?
Well, yeah, and I don't know, did you have any questions, GIS budget or?
Oh, yeah, I mean, if there's any questions about the GIS budget, happy to answer them. The GIS budget is about a 10% decrease over the 2024 amended budget. That's primarily due to the retirement of Martin Fitzgerald, who has been with us for a long number of years. So we'll be sad to see him go, but we're thankful for all of the years that he's been with us. He's been working part-time. for the last several years. So my budget is small, so that represented a fairly large decrease in the budget. The other main change in the budget was a proposal from the tourism director. We have, and we discussed this at our budget meeting last month, the county administrator and budget officer. We have historically been applying for occupancy tax funding through, attending the occupancy tax meetings. Heather proposed, instead of doing that she would give us an allocation of occupancy tax money in our budget to cover some of those programs that traditionally have been funded by occupancy tax. So that is a change from prior procedures that's reflected in the GIS budget as well as the planning budget. We would split that money essentially between the two different codes to cover our Stories from Open Space project, as well as a lot of printing costs for letterboxing passports and materials that we supply, printed materials that we supply to the visitor center. Aside from that, basically, the usual software, etc.
Mr. Crusito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so I understand, Heather approved a line item of occupancy tax in your budget to be used at your discretion.
So it was it's proposed.
But how do we know what it's used for and how do we know if it fits into the guidelines? I mean, I'm all for supporting it, but go ahead.
It's a proposal that she will have to take to the OCTAX committee for approval, and she'll track Gina Martin, who tracks all the, or not, it's
Lisa?
Lisa
Oh.
will track it the same way she tracks all OCTAX money, how it's used. So she track it in the tourism office.
Okay. Thank you.
So that would come before OCTAX next.
I don't know if it's coming next. I'll talk to
But it needs to happen before we approve the 2025 budget.
her. Does not.
And if I could note that Sarah Frankenfeld is actually going to be receiving the Wild Stewardship Award from the Friends of Adirondack Wild on October 11th. And this is all related to the work that Sarah's been doing with the First Wilderness Heritage Corridor. So you're going to be honored at October 11th, I believe. Yeah, at the Tannery Center. And it's a great award. I mean, so basically the work that Sarah is doing for the Stories from Open Space in the First Wilderness Heritage Corridor that's been done using occupancy tax dollars is being recognized by a very reputable group, their annual ceremony at the Tannery Center on the 11th. So that's a big deal.
Good for Sarah.
Yeah, exactly. Good for Sarah and good, I mean, yeah, and good for heritage tourism. And I think, one of the things is like, we often hear, we can moan and groan about the Adirondack Park and some of the limitations that we have from it. But the work that Sarah is doing to sort of celebrate our unique heritage and culture around here and appreciate what we have it's really nice that it's being recognized. It's also like building up our sense of place and pride and community too. So well done.
Great. Other updates?
I know we're probably trying to get out of here, but Warren County 2040, we've moved to the stage of the planning process where we have a set of draft goals, objectives, and priority actions that's on the project website. The next step in the planning process will be to hold some one-on-one meetings with supervisors to make sure that they understand the planning process, the draft goals and objectives, answer questions, make sure that things go in the right direction. In addition, we're working with department heads to make sure that this planning process is heading in the right direction, scheduling one-on-one interviews. And then we're going to have a series of public workshops, one up at the Chester Town Hall, and then one at SUNY Adirondack. The dates of those are
November 18th and November 21st. And they're
October
on the
18th.
website.
October? Both
No.
in November?
November.
Both in November.
Both in November. And we really want to give, elected officials, residents, stakeholders, everyone an opportunity to look at where this planning process has landed. to weigh in, to make sure this is heading in the right direction before the final plan is drafted. Once the plan is drafted, then it goes forward, through the official, committee and then board for approval. So I encourage everyone to take a look at the website, look at these draft goals, and then when we email you about having, one-on-one conversations, let's do it. So, yeah, thanks for supporting the project, and we're hitting the home stretch with it.
Where's the housing strategy? That's past due, right?
Yes, that's past due. We are actively working on that, devoting considerable amount of staff time. We've leveraged the comprehensive plans sort of goal setting. And now we're in the process of we have a list of actions that we think are most viable for Warren County, and we're gonna be actually workshopping that list and those opportunities with our partners like EDC, LDC, North Country Rural Development Coalition, Glens Falls Housing Authority, Rebuilding Together Saratoga, and Adirondack Roots, just really get a sense for what direction everyone is going to make sure that our actions as a county, the policies that we pursue, are the most opportune, as opposed to duplicating efforts or ignoring potential partnerships.
Questions? All right, any comments from the public? Entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Bean on the first, and Mr. Wall on the second, we are adjourned.